Most atheist scientists we found, the non-religious scientists, they didn't become atheists or less religious because of science. It was either that most of them grew up in non-religious households to begin with, so they had no contact with religion, or it was religion that made them less religious. So they would give us stories about how they were bad catechesis, role models who were like, the teachers or mentors or parents or clergy who told you shut their questioning down and shut down their sense of wonder.
And one of the questions I want to ask you is about how you moved from wait, Hinduism by way of atheism to Catholicism.
Yeah.
Is that how you describe it?
Yeah.
Our special guest today is Dr. Brandon Vaidyanathan. He is an associate professor and chair of the Sociology Department at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He's published 2 books on corporate topics. One's called Mercenaries and Missionaries, and the other is Secularity and Science. He has also just completed a large-scale international study on the role of beauty in science. And by the way, he's a convert to Catholicism by way of Hinduism and atheism.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Doctor, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Sure. Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
We met because you invited me to a lovely dinner, and you wanted to talk about beauty. And I know that you're just completing this study. Tell me a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, so the study is the first attempt to measure what the role of beauty in science is. And a lot of people might think, like, why would you even put those 2 words in a sentence together? Beauty and science have nothing to do with each other. But really, there's a very, very popular misconception about what scientists are and what science is. And we think of science, we think of like rational, methodical, calculating, analytical. We don't think of beauty as connected to science. But when we talk to scientists, that's what draws a lot of them to science. They find the natural world beautiful, the phenomena they study beautiful, but it's also understanding, the experience of grasping how reality works, gaining insights into the deeper mechanisms of how things are. That is an immensely pleasurable and beautiful experience, and that's what, for many of them, is the business of science.
And the business of science being a way to explain how, and I hear that, religion explains the why. I've heard that before, too.
Sure.
But I don't quite understand, what are they looking at they think is beautiful? I mean, like particles. I mean, look, science has done some amazing things, but it's also done some pretty crazy things.
Right. Yeah.
So how does one find beauty in the scientific world? You say they're fascinated, they're interested by it, but what's beautiful about it?
Yeah, so it varies. So some of it varies by discipline. So if you're a physicist, it's the ability to simplify things into smaller. So you can explain the laws of magnetism and electricity with like one little equation, right? So all of this complex reality can be boiled down to this one thing. So that kind of simplicity is really awe-inspiring. The fact that mathematics gives us a language with which to express the inner workings of reality, that is a source of profound beauty. For biologists, it's more complexity. It's like looking at the intricacies of some small, like tiny, microcellular organism and recognizing just how complex it is and how it's been engineered in ways that are baffling to us, right? So the engineering of even a small bacterium is really complicated, and so that is a source of marvel for them.
Do you think a doctor will look at, say, like a molecular physicist? I'm looking at the Big Bang show.
Sure.
And it was interesting because he was I'm looking at this character, I'm sure you're familiar with the Big Bang. Sheldon,
yeah.
Exactly. He was able to kind of find beauty in strange things.
Yeah.
But but he would look at art, pop culture, and he would say,
yeah,
he would have a real disdain for it.
Yeah.
So is beauty objective or is it subjective?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, right? I think it takes a bit of training for people to grasp the beauty of an equation, right? So I used to, my first roommate in college was a mathematician, and he asked me, this is my grad school, he asked me, what are you studying? And I told him, I'm looking at globalization and, how rapid economic development affects people and so on. He's like, okay. And I said, what do you do? He's like, I can't tell you, you wouldn't understand. So
wow, that's pretty like some friends you are. This is going to be a great roommate.
That's right. So, but he's right. I mean, like, I would have no idea how to even make sense of what he would, like, the things he found beautiful, like, require there's a high bar of entry almost to be able to grasp, right, those things as beautiful. But once you have that level of expertise, then you can understand, oh, here's why this equation is really like awe-inspiring, because we would never have imagined how all those terms could fit together, right? So, I mean, if you think of like what a lot of physicists call the most beautiful equation, they call this sort of the Maxwell's equations, and it combines the laws of electricity and magnetism. And those we only discovered them like in the last few hundred years, and then putting them all together into one little thing, right? That's the marvel.
So you've just concluded this study.
Yeah.
How long has it taken?
I think it's been a 5-year process.
A 5-year process.
First of all, trying to figure out, can we measure beauty at all? Like, because it seems it's so ephemeral, it's so, it's very hard to grasp. And then, so how do we then figure out what do scientists mean by beauty? And then how do we sort of create the right survey questions and then conduct the research and then analyze it, So yeah.
What, I mean, I'm sure it's going to get published.
Yeah.
But can you just give us some snapshots of your conclusions?
Yeah, so the biggest takeaways are there are 3 types of beauty. And the first is the sensory kind of beauty, right? So it's the beauty of the stars, the beauty of cells, even the beauty of equations. And, so some of it is more accessible to you and me. Some of it requires you to be an expert. The second is called useful beauty, and that's a bit more tricky. It's this idea that if an equation is really beautiful, it must be true. And so we go for beauty. And whatever we find beautiful, we can invest in that, and that's going to turn out to be true. And a lot of scientists were led by this in physics in particular for the past century. And it worked for Einstein and Dirac and Hermann Weyl, a lot of Nobel Prize winners. And then somehow in the last 60 years, it kind of stopped working. And there's some people who are now saying, it's become a source of cognitive bias that are.
Why did it stop working?
It's not producing any more results. So basically, those equations that we thought were really beautiful, we needed experiments to try to validate them, and the experiments don't seem to be supporting them over many decades.
Okay.
And so some people are like, just wait, we'll be right. And we'll turn out to be right. And other people are like, you know what, we're wasting so much time and like billions of euros, building these huge colliders and so on. And so there's this tension where people think, it's a bit like, hundreds of years ago, we thought that the planetary orbits had to be circular because the circle was the most beautiful shape, was the most perfect shape. Mm-hmm. Turned out we were wrong. They're elliptical. Mm-hmm. The ellipse isn't ugly, but if you're wedded to a particular kind of beauty and you think that it has to be circular because the celestial bodies, have to meet some kind of criterion of perfection, that's the source of bias, right?
Okay.
And it's going to block you. So people say we're kind of stuck there. In the second kind of beauty, about the useful beauty thing.
All right.
Our current beauty standards in science have outlived their utility, people are saying. And so I'm not a scientist, but what I could do is I can feed scientists these statements and say, do you agree with these kinds of statements that if an equation is beautiful, it must be true? Turns out most of them don't think so. So there's some who do, but the vast majority of scientists say, beauty can be useful. It can be a guide, but we shouldn't rely on it completely. We really need to experiment and truth, and we need some beauty has to be tethered to truth. Basically, is what most scientists think.
And that's what the useful part is that
the usefulness
it is connected to truth.
Yeah, it's the assumption that beauty is the guide, right? That if it's beautiful, it must be true.
Okay.
And so it's a leap of faith.
So what's the third?
Third is what we think is the most important, and it's the beauty of understanding. And so that's when you see insights into how reality works. And so you run an experiment, and then it reveals something to you that either you predicted it or you didn't predict it. In either case, you're grasping something, and you go, "Oh my God, that's how things are." And the funny thing is, the way in which people express this kind of beauty is that's how things are. I've been, as part of this other project I've been doing, exploring beauty outside of science. I've been talking to poets and cocktail bar owners and so on. And I recently talked to a poet, and I asked him, what's a beautiful poem? He says, you read something, and it gives you an insight into some aspect of reality, and you go, that's how things are. He used the exact same phrase as a Nobel Prize-winning biologist told me. Like, it's the same kind of beauty that you experience in poetry as you do in science. It's understanding reality. It's almost like reality is disclosing itself to you, and you grasp it and you go, wow, I'm privileged to receive this.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. It's almost the definition of sacrament, a visible sign of invisible grace. As one German philosopher, theologian would say, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And so beauty is what it is. It's the reality of something. There's also a philosophy that says truth equals beauty plus power.
Huh.
Have you heard that before?
I have not.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah. I have to think about what that means. What
because,
kind of power? Yeah.
Because the truth is that it is something beautiful, obviously, and it has the power to move you
right.
in the right direction. But anyway, I'm
fascinated
by beauty.
Yeah, because one of the things that we learn from scientists is like there's a lot of things that initially you didn't find beautiful, but it turned out to be true. And once it turned out to be true, it was no longer seen as ugly, right? The move from the sphere to the ellipse in the orbits. We don't think of ellipse
Gosh,
as ugly.
this is like a Cinderella story.
Right, yeah.
It's like you always have those 80s movies where you have this really beautiful girl, but she's dressed like a nerd.
Right.
And then just by some freak chance, some studly guy just sees the beauty in her, and then it all comes out.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. At what point did you just think, I want to study beauty?
Yeah, I mean, it was really when I started. So I was doing this previous study on science and religion. We were talking to scientists about.
Yeah, I want to hear about that for sure.
Yeah, so that was the world's, again, first large-scale study of science. And really, like, so we did 8 countries. We surveyed some 20,000 scientists, interviewed 600 something of them.
What kind of staff do you have to process that?
Massive team, and I was just on that project. I was just a postdoc, and that was at Rice University about 10 years ago, and. So that was, in that project, at the end of these long interviews with scientists, a lot of them told us how many sacrifices they're making for their careers. They'd given up their health, they'd given up lucrative jobs. They could have been working for like Google or something.
Sure.
They chose to be a scientist at a university. And we asked them, why do you do it? What makes it worthwhile? And they would say, because it's beautiful. And I didn't expect that answer. It was like not at all what I would imagine.
Not money?
There's no money in it, right? Because as an academic, you certainly don't get paid, nearly half as much as somebody in industry.
Cooks are the same way.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting. So, you said you wanted to find out why they do what they do, and they said it's because it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I want to know, what do they mean by that?
And what did they mean?
Yeah. Well, these 3 things, right? So there's the sensory, the useful, but most of all, understanding. It's really that.
And how does it change them?
I think it makes them, so it draws them to commit their lives to science in the first place. So they become scientists because of an encounter with beauty. It sustains them through the difficulties they encounter. We have some statistical analysis where we show that the more frequently you encounter beauty in your work, that is, the more frequently you experience a sense of gratitude for learning something new, a sense of awe in the presence of some new finding, encountering symmetry or simplicity or complexity, the more often that happens, the better your mental health. So net of all kinds of controls. So it's good for you.
So beauty is good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to ask this. I'm just going to ask it now. How do you find it?
How do you find it? It's everywhere. I think that's the thing is you have to sort of be attuned to where, what are the things that move you? Where are you experiencing potentially some kind of gratitude for something? Where do you find an insight? Like, where are things coming together? Where do you experience a sense of harmony? Where do you find a sense of marvel at complexity?
Are there some objective places where people do that, like nature?
Yeah,
they call it grounding, where you put your bare foot to the earth. It's like people's blood.
Yeah.
More active.
Yeah. So nature is certainly one. That's the universal one for a lot of people. You can find certainly, if you've been drawn to become a scientist and study whatever, even a cockroach. The people who study these things and find them beautiful. But it's the kind of the fascination with how things work, right, that draws a lot of people, or the sort of being open to surprises. So if you're one of the things to be a really good scientist, you have to be willing to change your mind and even find it pleasurable to change your mind.
Oh gosh,
because
we trust the science, and they don't want to change their mind.
Right. Yeah,
it's frustrating. I want to jump into this one of your books about secularity and science, because you obviously have a fascination with science.
Sure.
The secular world seems to be a place where they think science reigns supreme and not the church. And so I don't want you to necessarily talk about your faith just yet.
Sure.
But what was it about the secularity and the science that you wanted to correlate?
Yeah, we wanted to know, like when we started this work, and there still are these popular ideas that science and religion are in conflict. And there's some really popular writers like Richard Dawkins and so on who've made this claim that religion is a delusion, and so God is a delusion, and so forth. And we wanted to know, like, do most scientists actually believe that? Right? Because they make it sound, the loud voices make it sound as though scientists are all atheists and they're all hostile to religion.
Yeah, not the first ones.
Yeah, it turns out they're wrong. That's just not true.
Clearly.
Now, it is true that in most countries, so we studied the US, UK, Italy, India, France, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Turkey. So those were the 8 countries we studied.
Okay.
And in most of those countries, scientists are more secular than the general public. So they're less religious. They affiliate with a religious tradition less, they go to services less. So that's true. The exceptions are Hong Kong and Taiwan, where the scientists are more religious than the public.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there's a different story there because there's Christian universities and so on. And so those who go into those universities are more likely to be religious. It's a different story. But that already tells you it's not a universal, that science and religion are,
Incompatible. Yeah.
And the other thing is, across all of these countries, even where, like France is where there's the most number of atheist scientists, they're not hostile to religion. The vast majority of scientists in every single country saw science and religion as independent. So they're not in conflict. So we gave them these options. Like for you, do you see this relationship with science and religion as conflict or independence or compatibility? And the vast majority, 50% plus in every country, was independence. So they're different, because you talked about the how and the why. That's exactly. So this is the guy, Stephen Jay Gould, who talks about non-overlapping magisteria. So religion deals with the why questions, science deals with the how questions. They're not really about the same thing. That's exactly what most scientists believe.
Most scientists.
Yeah.
Over 50, you said.
Yeah. And then there are minorities, and the minorities vary. So in some countries, you've got 25% or so who see science and religion as conflicting, but also the same number who see them as being compatible.
So, but that small minority, 25%, it's not super small.
Sure. Yeah.
But they have an influence. And it seems that for those who are not scientific, they always grasp onto that and they just shove it in our faces and say, your religion thought that the earth was flat.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
thank you. Everybody thought, even scientists thought that the world was flat at one point. And it kind of frustrates me because it seems like secularity and science almost equates atheism. Like a real anti-religious experience. Was that, I don't want to feed into, but was that your experience, or were people receptive to you trying to kind of elucidate their positions?
Yeah, no, they a lot of it was interesting. Even in the UK, where Richard Dawkins is this really popular atheist, a lot of atheist scientists said he does not represent us. We have no problem with religion. We're not hostile to religion. We just don't care about it. So there's not an issue. We don't know. I
don't know how I feel about that.
So, but the thing is, most scientists they're not opposed to it. They're indifferent to it. They don't see how it matters. They're like, well, it's nice if people want to do this stuff, but
it should be to a degree. It should be free from bias of any sort because you just want to deal with the fact of a thing.
Yeah. Huh. So they didn't like this idea of hostility, and they're not, they thought it could be useful psychologically for people to be religious. We don't know if science. A lot of them would say science can't answer questions about the existence of God. That's not the business of science. We do science. We don't even know how to answer that question, right? So, and most atheist scientists we found, the non-religious scientists, they didn't become atheists or less religious because of science. It was either that most of them grew up in non-religious households to begin with, so they had no contact with religion, or it was religion that made them less religious. So they would give us stories about how they were bad catechesis, role models who were like, the teachers or mentors or parents or clergy who told you shut their questioning down and shut down their sense of wonder. And then they said, you know what, forget it, it's not for me.
But I mean, it's the antithesis of religion to not ask questions. Anselm even said it, you've got to seek understanding, you've got to ask questions. And one of the questions I want to ask you is about how you moved from Hinduism by way of atheism to Catholicism. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, I grew up a Hindu, the son of very pious Brahmin.
Did you grow up in America?
No, I grew up in the Middle East. I was born in Qatar. I was raised in the Middle East, in Oman mostly, a little bit in the UAE. And my parents moved there from India because there was work to be found. There are a lot of Filipinos there in those countries as well. And, that's just a reason, because can't find jobs back home, so you got to move. And so I grew up in a very pious household. I was very devout as a kid and would pray a lot. And I really loved Hindu mythology and, I was really fascinated by it. And around 10, I lost my faith because the incident was I had a friend whose dad had a heart attack, and I really prayed for this man to live because I couldn't imagine a kid going through his life without his dad. His dad died, and I said, well, forget it. I can't imagine that there's some kind of good God that, So, and a lot of the kind of faith I had was very transactional. I was taught in a way to you perform these sacrifices in the temple for God to give you health, wealth, and wisdom.
Yeah.
So that's really what you did. And it wasn't a relationship with a living person who cared about you, right?
Sure.
So I didn't have any kind of faith for many years, and then I fell in love in my last year of high school with a girl who was Catholic, and then she and I had this really covert, clandestine relationship because we were in Dubai, and it's not a country where you could be open, and we're from different backgrounds. She was Catholic, I was Hindu, Our parents would never have allowed us to go out together.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Even her
yeah,
parents?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, just from our, our different backgrounds. Plus, we were in high school, and,
Sure.
and we were both in very unhealthy families. So my mom became severely mentally ill when I was 8. So she was a physician, and then she had psychotic episodes, developed schizophrenia, and so on. And she
Oh
was
my.
kind of untreated for many years after, and just kept spiraling. And that for me was sort of this deep kind of wound, I think, also against God and against reality. That how can God allow this? How could there be? My deeper question was, how can she have any worth or value? And I was really taught that you have worth based on your performance and how intelligent you are and how productive you are. And so I couldn't see her as a person of worth or value anymore, and it was a deep struggle for me. And so I was escaping from my kind of household, and this girl was escaping from her household where her dad was an alcoholic, and so we had this very unhealthy relationship for a year.
Even in the UAE.
Yeah, even in the UAE, it's a universal sort of thing.
Everything's supposed to be perfect there.
Right. Good Lord.
Listen, I've been. It's so beautiful for like 5 miles, and then it's just
Yeah, it's
rough.
Yeah, it's a veneer of it's an illusion. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
mirage.
that's almost like a false beauty.
It is. It is. Yeah. It's very oppressive, actually. So, but anyway, we were there, and a year into this relationship where I was really sure that this was the one for me. And what happened was I basically, I was the top student in the school when I met her, and then I stopped going to school because I just wanted to spend time with her. And I started failing all my exams and got into a lot of trouble with my principal, with my dad. We got into fist fights.
This is serious.
Yeah, I got pretty nasty. And so my idea was, I'm just gonna get married to her. I'm gonna, it's us against the world, and all this sort of these romantic Bollywood kinds of ideas.
Wow.
Because that
Was
shaped
there
my-
a dance?
Yeah. There was something going on that it's like keep this G-rated. But anyway.
But this is teenagers.
Yeah.
And I mean, in beauty of romantic love,
Yeah.
it's powerful.
It is very seductive, very, very misleading.
But it might not be true.
Right.
It might be powerful,
Exactly.
but it might not be true. And that's why those three things almost beauty equals truth and power.
Right.
There's something there. But anyway, keep going.
No, so we were so a year into this relationship, one morning she called me and told me, I have to tell you something. I've been seeing another guy for the last 3 months, and I want you to be my best friend while I go out with this guy. I want your permission. So she asked for my permission. This is the most absurd request. I
This
could
girl has
never
got some
gumption. That's right.
some serious gumption. There's the word I wanted.
I mean, look, like it was like a Kafka. I mean, I could never have imagined. Like, I could not compute the request, because I would understand. You know what? Things aren't working out. We need to break up. That wasn't her claim.
No.
It was you're the most important person to me, other than this guy who I've been seeing on the side.
She
and I
sounds
want
like a
your permission.
politician.
Yeah. So I said, no, that's insane. It's him or me. And, I slammed the phone down. I called him up, told him to back off. And he said, and so this is a strange thing, because I'd known this girl just for a year, because I'd just moved to Dubai. I just met her. We started going out. I knew this guy for about 10 years. He was in 3 different cities that I'd lived in, like an ominous figure following me, different places. And as soon as I introduced him to my girlfriend, then she asked him out, behind my back. So he didn't know the two of us were together. But he said, no girl has ever liked me before, so I'm going to fight for this one. And so then I was like, I need to find some thugs to break his legs. And then meantime, I heard that the two of them were going to the first Catholic youth retreat in Dubai. So this was like a big thing. It was, Youth 2000. There was this big international movement, evangelization. And so it was 1998. There's a big weekend retreat in church. The two of them were in the choir. They were going to go. I said, hell no, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to be a nuisance. And this was the weekend before my final exams were going to begin. I was already failing out. I was like, I'm just going to go do
Top
this.
student. Now you are seeking a mob. A hitman.
That's right. So I literally punched my dad in the face and left, because he was like, you're not going anywhere. Like, how can you, And I couldn't tell him I'm going to a church retreat.
Doctor, I'm honestly visibly shook right now.
So anyway, I was 18 a long time ago. But anyway, but you can see how messed up things were. I mean, there was like, it was an utterly hopeless situation. Going to this religious retreat, I knew the director of the choir, and I said, I'm going to come and sing in the choir. So I'm there just glaring at the two of these people. I'm there only to make them uncomfortable and maybe to do an expose of them.
Wow.
And this is where somehow there's a space in this retreat to do these reflections and have these questions. And I was like, look, I don't, my life is going nowhere. I was so sure what was going to happen. I was going to marry this girl, and everything's collapsed. I have no future. I don't know if I'll pass my exams. My family has fallen apart. And here are all these people who believe in God. So I want to know, is there anything to this, right? Is there anything more to life? And I want some proof, because that was kind of my sort of prayer. And the answer was very unexpected. I found myself at the end of the retreat going up to the girl and saying, you know what, you want to go out with this guy? That's fine. I don't want to hold on to you. I don't want to possess you or own you. I want you to be free. And it was like an out-of-body experience. It was as if I could sort of see myself and go, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Because those words that were never planned, I never felt anything like it, but it was as though I had tapped a deeper part of myself that somehow wasn't surprised by all the injustice and like, how dare you after all I've done? Like my sense of rights was dead. And I simply wanted to be free, to love, and I wanted her to be free. And it was as though I just wanted to say yes to whatever I was asked to do by something else. Right. So there was this other kind of like, I don't control my destiny or hers. Something else does. I'm going to go with the flow and say yes, and it's going to be better than whatever I had in mind. So there's this weird kind of experience, deeply freeing. And she was shocked. She didn't expect this because I was so jealous and possessive. And
Dude, you just showed up to a Christian conference.
right. That's right.
Staring them down while they're singing,
Yeah.
Amazing Grace or something.
Yeah, I could sing of your love forever and all that stuff. That's the praise and worship stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so it was crazy. It was utterly crazy. I couldn't believe it. She was really ecstatic. She ran off with this guy. And then for the next week, she would call me every day and say, oh, we held hands and we kissed. Because now I was her confidant. She had to report to me what we've been doing. So it was very uncomfortable, but it felt like for the first time I was genuinely loving her. Like I wasn't just using her for my pleasure. Like this was like something real. And that was kind of unusual for me. And then in 2 weeks, she said, you know what, this guy's really boring. We need to get back together. You're not the same person anymore. I know what's happened to you, but we want to get back together now. And now my other friends said, now you could stick it to her and stab her in the neck and say, forget it, and show her what it feels like. But I was like, no, really, I'm happy to, if she wants to be my girlfriend, that's fine. If she wants to leave me again the following week, I'd be happy to do that. Because I really just felt like I'm called to be with this person in whatever capacity that, she needs me to be. And I don't dictate that. I don't call the shots. And so that was a strange experience. Very unsettling.
Did you pass your exams?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't do great, but I passed. I
hate you. You're so smart. I mean, you could go through all that drama and still pass your exams.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, I don't. I was writing them like a zombie. So
what exactly eventually happened that just made you think, I want to be Catholic?
Well, so the only thing that was interesting now that this girl and I were back together, she wasn't my God, and I didn't really know. I had all these plans. Okay, so now high school's over. Now what? And I didn't know what to do. The only thing that was interesting was this youth group at the church. Like, so the people who were part of this youth choir, they were going to meet regularly and have the kind of a community that they were starting. And so she and I would go to this community along with this guy, the ex, who she dumped me for.
Well, I mean, it is a small community of international people.
Yeah.
Is this St. Mary's, by the way?
St. Mary's, yeah.
It's not so small now.
Yeah. I mean, it's
like
massive,
20 masses on a weekend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it always was that big, but so that's the place. And so she and I and this guy and a few other friends from that group started a rock band. So, but then the thing was, they had a catechesis before in the youth choir. They had a little catechesis, and they talked about the gospel, about God being a father, not an abstract force, but a father who loves unconditionally. And that idea of unconditional love was absolutely innovative for me. I'd never heard of it, but I tasted it. It was my experience with this girl.
Neat.
It made sense. The proof of this was a naked guy on the cross betrayed by his friends. Also could relate to it now. And not the kind of person who comes back from the dead and punches Peter in the face and says, you bastard, you left me hanging there, right? So there's this kind of non-punitive ability to for relationships to be transformed that the Gospels seem to show. And I was like, so there's something to it. Like, I get this. And so I went up to the leader of the youth group, who was a lay evangelist from India, and he, I said, I think I may want to get baptized. This girl and I are together. We might get married, and her parents would expect me to be a Christian. And he's like, that's not why you get baptized. Who's Jesus to you? I'm like, I don't know. But I told him what happened to me. He's like, you've had an encounter with the Lord. He's done something to you. He's touched your life. You should talk to him. He's a real person. He's alive. I said, look, man, my mom talks to invisible people. I don't do this sort of thing.
Sure.
So he said, why don't you take a book and write a letter as though you're writing to a friend? And I said, okay, I can do that. So I went that evening, I bought this little orange notebook, and I started writing, and these words started exploding out of me, these questions of why, who are you, what is this, what's going on, and how can this be? And And I kind of got freaked out that I had all these questions and all this sort of resentment and anger against God for my life, for my mother.
Have never experienced sincere religion since you were 10 years old.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I had all of this stuff percolating that just started pouring out, and I felt some presence responding, which kind of was unsettling. So I ran back to this guy and I was like, listen, man, you need to tell me what's going on here. This is all really weird. And I don't believe this stuff. I'm a materialist. There's how can I believe in non-material reality and spirits and so on? Fortunately, he was very well trained in theology, and he had a lot of, Augustine and Lewis and so on.
God.
Yeah. So I had a lot of, so essentially it was my education was a lot of, really St. Augustine and C.S. Lewis.
I've discovered that a lot of people who become Catholic for very good reasons. Mm-hmm. And when people leave the Catholic Church, it's really oftentimes for personal, but not factual, and sometimes very insipid reasons.
Sure.
I mean, because you're not a dumb guy. You're very intelligent, clearly. And at 18 years old, you're probably even just smart. You just had more chutzpah. And yet you wanted to have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Yeah. But it was because something happened that I couldn't explain.
Clearly.
Right? I mean, I had learned two things. One was I thought I knew myself. I was wrong, right? Like I am that person that was able to tell this girl, I want you to be free. I didn't know that's who I was. I didn't know that I had a part of me that wanted to love, right? Like that was really love. So I knew so it was a sense very clearly I know nothing about myself or what really matters to me. And the other question was, where does my worth come from and where does my mother's worth come from? And those are the deepest questions, which they couldn't come from this girl, couldn't come from society. And the Christian claim is, here's this man who is, God who has become flesh and is through his death and resurrection given us our worth and value. And so if that's true, then not only do I have dignity, but my mother has the same dignity. So it solved a lot of problems very quickly for me that I couldn't find answers to anywhere.
Yeah, he is kind of the way, the truth, and the life, right? I mean, now, you were baptized at 18 years old then?
It was just before I was 19. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when did you come to America?
So all this happened. So that the breakup with a girl, the initial thing happened April 98. I was baptized January 99. So very fast, and short-circuited the RCIA process. Moved to Canada in April of 99. And the reason I was baptized in January was because they knew I was going to Canada and they thought the heathen are going to corrupt him. Let's get him now.
For sure. Canada, I love you and everything, but.
So anyway, so then I was in Canada from 99 until 2007, and then I moved to the States in 2007.
So what happened to the girl?
So she and I were together for 2 years after. So 1 year, or maybe a little less, year and a half. So
and the long distance thing just
it didn't work out. We became different people, and for me, my faith became the most important thing. And she's kind of a nominal Catholic, and didn't really care that much about her.
Can I ask you about how your mom is, and was there healing there?
Yeah, no, she's still. I mean, she was diagnosed for the first time around the time of my baptism, a little bit before. With schizophrenia and so on, but then she never really took medication, and so she's still severely mentally ill. But my relationship with her was transformed. Right, I used to have a lot of loathing and hatred for her, and that turned from that into some kind of compassion, into more into acceptance, and now a little bit more like delight. Where I see her maybe once a year, talk on the phone for about 10 seconds because that's all she can tolerate. But I can delight in her presence, as a beautiful person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, suffering brings beauty out of you. When you are dealing with people who are suffering, you could either respond ugly or you can respond beautifully. One of the reasons why I wanted to interview you more is because at that dinner, which again was a lovely dinner. I mean, the food was fantastic.
Sure.
And you invited a whole bunch of us, and honestly, it was a very random group of people. Why did you invite me? I felt so out of place. There was a bunch of smart people.
Oh, that's not
table.
True. I mean, you need a little more self-respect, man.
No, it's not. It had nothing to do with respect. It was just so.
No. I mean,
it was just I've never experienced anything like that. Yeah. And actually, many people who were there. Had no idea why they were invited.
Yeah. So this is the thing. I've been doing this as part of an offshoot of this project. After talking to scientists, I wanted to figure out what does beauty look like in our work, in different domains of work, and so I've been doing I've been making some videos, I've been doing podcasts, but one of the things I want to do is to have dinners, bring people together for a conversation around a meal. and have a moment of interaction around beauty, right? So where you remember the first question, y'all came to the table, and the point of contact with each other is not here's my title, here are my accomplishments, but rather as a child, where did I experience something beautiful?
I remember
right?
that.
And that's the beginning of the conversation. So that really creates, I think, a beautiful connection and intimacy between people, and a really, truly human contact that I think we need in this post-pandemic world.
Yeah, and I remember one of them was explaining how they were in the middle of the Alps or somewhere, and they saw the beauty of the stars.
Yeah.
And I remember my experience of beauty was this fake island in a hotel, which I claimed as my own at one point. So he was looking at stars. I was looking at plastic palm trees.
Exactly, but it's there. It's everywhere. Right?
Oh, yeah.
This is,
Now, you also did something, you shared something that was very touching to me, and it got you actually emotional. And I'm not asking you to repeat the emotion, but you started talking about your child. And you started to get very emotional. And I honestly, it was... I had to pause and just think, what's going on here?
Huh.
Do you remember that?
No, I don't. I don't.
You have a
I have 6 kids, so I don't know if
one of them was a daughter.
Yeah.
You were explaining about your daughter, and it was just something very banal that she did. And you were watching it, and you had to step back, and you got emotional.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I can't remember what this was. Yeah.
Maybe it was that Sazerac that you drank.
That's right. That's right.
No, but I just remember there was just a moment where you were emotionally invested in this thing. And then I just realized that was a very beautiful moment for you. So let me ask you, what is like one of the most beautiful moments that you've encountered?
Yeah, these dinners, I think for me more recently, those are, so here's what I like about them that I find really really beautiful, is that being able to bring people together from very different backgrounds who would ordinarily never be in the same room, never talk to each other, with different faith backgrounds, different belief systems, etc., to be able to come together and discover the beauty of each other's humanity, and making that happen in 2 hours, right? So like really creating that connection, because we really, I mean, we're so desperately yearning to be seen and want to, I think, also to see the other. Like I think there's a part of us that really wants to see other people for who they are and not just
I think sincere people. I think there's a lot of people who just don't want to see the others.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the result of some wounds they have, and I think deep down, I think this is a deep desire and a need
to get
for
rid
us.
of that wound, because I mean, I think I see it terribly.
Yeah.
I just watch people who can't even have a real conversation about anything factual. They're just screaming their face, or they'll.
Yeah. I think my sense is that it's a lot of brokenness that I don't know what it takes to overcome that. It takes a lot. Takes a lot of love, but gosh, I wish I could remember the story with my daughter. Nothing comes to mind, but for me, the beauty is for me. And how do you enable this connection to happen? Because I think we so desperately want to be in relationships that are meaningful. We don't, there's all this small chat and chit,
Sure.
So much of our day is filled with superficial interaction, and I think we crave depth. In fact, one of the other things I've been recently doing is a national study of the Catholic priesthood, and one of the biggest complaints that's come out. But you guys,
hold on a second. Go ahead, give it to me, doctor.
Yeah, but this is one of the things that priests are yearning for is truly vulnerable connection with each other. And they're like, we don't have these structures in our dioceses, and the communications is very superficial, and so I think all of us need.
I didn't know you were doing that. I'm gonna have to bring you back on and get the lowdown on this.
Sure.
Now you love what you're doing, clearly.
Yeah.
If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
So if I had all the money in the world, I would fund these studies by myself and do them. So I just love. I mean, this is for me. This is like the scientist loves this kind of beauty of understanding, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking for, is understanding people, understanding how we work together, creating opportunities for making connection happen. I'd love to learn how to be a better storyteller, like through video, and that's the kind of thing that I love the work you do on that front.
Oh, appreciate it.
Yeah, so it's really.
You guys hear that? Hear that?
That's the kind of thing I want to learn how to do. So to learn how to tell better stories and highlight, because as an academic, as a sociologist, a lot of my last 15 years, I've interviewed thousands of people, but they're all confidential interviews.
Yeah.
And I've always wished, gosh, I wish the world could share this conversation.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I wish that confessions. I mean, we can talk about confessions, we just can't talk about the confession. I don't like asking this question but it really humanizes people. About just something that was weird or embarrassing that was a learning moment for you.
Oh,
Besides
yeah.
punching your dad in the face and
Right.
trying to break
Gosh.
up this
Yeah. Yeah.
thing that you initially introduced him to her, but but what was an embarrassing moment for you that you just said, I learned so much from it?
Oh wow, that's a good one. There's definitely lots of these, but I have to think of what comes to mind at the moment. I mean, the one there was throughout. One of the biggest lessons I learned, I think, when I was an undergrad, like going in, stepping out of grad school, I used to like want to be the person who had the best insights and to say all these brilliant things. And it got to this point where I would go off on these long tangents every time. And somebody had this really biting comment about, oh, there goes, he came up with some word like there's, Brandon running off again or something, something like that. And I was like, oh,
Brandonizing.
yeah, something like that. And I realized, gosh, this is actually not working, and it's actually humiliating. And I thought I was being really, really smart. So that taught me that maybe I need to listen. And
Now, you actually came to a dinner that I hosted.
yeah,
How was that, by the way, in all honesty?
it was great. The food was great. The conversation was great. You put us, with the people we didn't know before.
Yeah.
And that was a great, yeah.
It was really an exercise of, well, that's why we call them culinary camaraderie dinners.
Yeah.
You just become friends. But if you could cook a meal for a person that would mean so much to you, who would that be and what would you cook?
Ooh, man. Oh gosh. That's a really good question. Man.
There's no wrong answers, clearly.
I know, but I can't think of, because there's so many. The first person who came to mind was my brother, because I love my brother very much.
Interesting.
He's my younger brother, and he's a pop star in India.
Wait,
And
wait, what?
Yeah, he's a legit pop star. This is part of like
Dancer?
Like
Too? Does he-
so not so much dance. Maybe in music videos.
Dude, I want to
They're-
interview him.
they're- yeah,
Need to interview.
he's brilliant.
We're going to India, guys. We're going to India.
Gotta do it. You gotta do it. They're really, yeah. So they're like the One
awesome.
Direction of India, kind of. That's
kidding
that
me.
level. Yeah, they're really good. So my brother's really into cooking, and so I'd love to be able to make a meal that he would find like.
Is he Hindu?
He's not religious, but
So he would eat a hamburger?
yeah. Well, actually, no. He's now vegetarian. He
Okay.
doesn't. He's just lost the taste for meat. But
Got it.
we were in Portugal last week, so that's where we're. And I took him to Fatima. So my godfather is so the guy who was who started that youth group in Dubai. He went on to become a Catholic priest, and then he met my brother 4 years ago. Gave him a rosary. My brother has worn the rosary every day for the last 4 years. He wears it on all his music videos, and like whenever you see him, he's like that's his thing. So I said I got to take him to Fatima. So we went to Fatima last week.
It's amazing.
And,
Now,
yeah.
listen, where can people find? I mean, this is absolutely fascinating. I do want to have you back on at one point.
Sure.
Learn about this priesthood survey that you were doing, the study. Is there a way people can reach out to you or learn from your other works and
Sure,
journals and
yeah.
such?
The easiest place to the work on beauty, the best place to go is beautyatwork.net, and so that's got the podcast and the videos and so on beauty. That's my own website. If you just Google Brandon Vaidyanathan, you'll find. Well, you gotta know how to spell the name, but
Vaidyanathan.
if you've got the,
did it.
yeah, you did it. But if you've got the link, anyone when they find my spelling, they
We will
can get that.
definitely put the link on there. But it's really awesome. Is there anything that you want people to walk away with from this conversation before we say goodbye for now?
Be open to surprises and to discovering how much God loves you, because I think we put God in a box, but He's much bigger, and so just stay open to surprises and give Him permission to work in your life. And that's what I'll say.
Well, Dr. Brandon Vaidyanathan.
Vaidyanathan. There we go.
Thank you. This was absolutely fascinating. And
Thank you.
Your story is I
didn't make it up,
It is
so.
a Bollywood film, I tell you what. And listen, if you want to learn more about my reaction to this conversation, basically my carry-out order, make sure you join us on our Patreon community. And there you can get access to even more stuff. And discovering the power of beauty in your life, that is certainly our hope. And so make sure you stick around for more Father Leo shows where we are discovering and dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. In the meantime, stay hungry for God.